They say the past never truly dies. But what if it waits for you, lurking in the shadows, longing to be remembered? The Red Bride's Curse. Chapter 1. The Bride Who Waits. The town of Ravenswood was no stranger to ghost stories. Dark legends whispered among the townsfolk spoke of cursed lands, haunted homes, and spirits that never found peace. But none were as infamous as the tale of Willow Manor, the mansion where Evelyn Carter had died. For over a century, the grand estate had stood at the edge of town, its once beautiful walls now swallowed by decay. The iron gates creaked in the wind, and the tall oak trees cast shadows that seemed almost alive under the pale glow of the moon. Few dared to approach it, even fewer dared to enter, because every midnight, without fail, the sound of soft weeping echoed from the highest room of the house, the bridal chamber. It was said that Evelyn still waited there, forever clad in her blood-red wedding dress, her heart forever broken. Some believed she longed for her lost love. Others whispered that she sought vengeance. But one thing was certain: those who stepped into Willow Manor never left unchanged. Chapter 2. The Forgotten Invitation. The story of Evelyn Carter was one that had haunted Ravenswood for generations. Every child in town had heard it at least once, passed down from elders who spoke in hushed voices. The details varied, but the core remained the same. Evelyn had been betrayed, abandoned, and in her despair she had taken her own life in the very room that was meant to be her wedding chamber. They said she had worn a wedding dress of deep crimson, a scandalous choice for the time. Some believed she had chosen red because she wanted to curse her unfaithful fiancé, while others claimed it was meant to symbolize eternal love. But whatever, the truth was, Evelyn never got her wedding, and her soul never found rest. 100 years later, the legend was about to awaken again. It was a cold autumn evening when Daniel Whitmore arrived in Ravenswood. A historian and journalist, Daniel had spent years traveling to forgotten towns, documenting urban legends and hauntings. He had chased ghosts in abandoned hospitals, explored cursed forests, and even spent nights in notorious haunted hotels. But something about Willow Manor intrigued him more than any other story. It wasn't just the tragedy of Evelyn Carter that fascinated him. It was the pattern. Every few decades, someone had attempted to stay in the manor overnight, and every single time, they had left screaming, if they ever left at all. Daniel had read every newspaper clipping, every local account, and every whispered tale from the elderly, yet no one could explain what exactly happened inside. Now, he was determined to find out. With his camera, voice recorder, and a strong sense of skepticism, he booked a room in the only inn in town. Preparing to enter Willow Manor at midnight, the townsfolk begged him not to go. The bride waits for someone, one old woman had warned him. If she thinks it's her lost love returning, she won't let you leave. Daniel had laughed it off. Ghosts didn't exist. And even if they did, he had spent enough time chasing them to know that most stories were just that, stories. But that night, as the clock struck 12 and he stepped through the rusted iron gates of Willow Manor, he felt something shift in the air, something unseen, something waiting. Chapter 3. The Door That Shouldn't Open. Daniel stood before Willow Manor, his breath visible in the cold night air. The mansion loomed above him like a forgotten relic of time, its once beautiful structure now twisted with age and decay. The windows were like hollow eyes, staring at him in eerie silence. As he stepped closer, the wind picked up, rustling the dead leaves along the cracked pathway. The iron gates behind him let out a slow, mournful creak, as if whispering a warning. He hesitated, gripping his flashlight. This was the part where most people turned around. But Daniel wasn't most people. With a steadying breath, he pressed forward, his boots crunching against the damp ground. His fingers traced the faded golden letters engraved on the wooden door. Willow Manor, 1823. And then it happened. Before he even reached for the doorknob, the massive wooden door slowly creaked open by itself. Daniel froze. His rational mind searched for an explanation. Was it the wind? A faulty hinge? But as the door continued to swing wider, revealing the dark abyss inside, a sharp chill ran down his spine. He had visited hundreds of abandoned buildings. He had heard plenty of stories about self-opening doors, but never before had he seen one open for him, almost as if someone was expecting him. Inside the manor, the air was suffocating. Daniel stepped in and the wooden floor groaned beneath his weight. Dust swirled in the beam of his flashlight, revealing cobwebs that stretched like veins across the ceiling. The walls were lined with old paintings, their once vibrant colors now faded into shadows. At the end of the grand hallway stood a spiral staircase, its railings carved with intricate floral patterns. At the top, he could barely make out the silhouette of a hallway leading to the rooms above. His destination, the bridal chamber. That was where the weeping was heard. That was where Evelyn Carter had died. He moved cautiously, his footsteps echoing through the silent manor. He kept his recorder running, documenting every creak, every whisper of the wind. And then, the first sign of something unnatural. A single red petal drifted from the ceiling, landing gently at his feet. Daniel's pulse quickened. There were no fresh flowers in the manor, no reason for petals to fall. Yet, as he slowly lifted his gaze, his stomach twisted. At the top of the staircase, something moved. A shadow, a figure, a bride in red. Chapter 4. The bride. In red, Daniel's breath caught in his throat. At the top of the staircase, standing perfectly still, was a woman in a crimson wedding gown. The dress was old-fashioned, with intricate lace details and a flowing train that seemed to blend into the darkness. The fabric shimmered unnaturally under the dim glow of his flashlight, as though it were made of something not of this world. He couldn't see her face. A delicate red veil covered her features, concealing everything except the faint outline of her lips. But what disturbed him most wasn't her presence. It was the way she didn't move. She didn't breathe. She didn't react. She simply stood there, waiting. Daniel swallowed hard. His instincts screamed at him to run, to get out, before it was too late. But his rational mind fought back. This was why he had come. Reaching for his voice recorder, he steadied his breath and spoke. "Who are you?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. For a long moment, there was silence. Then, she moved. It was slow at first, almost hesitant, as if she were testing the weight of her limbs. The folds of her dress rippled unnaturally, as if the fabric was alive. Then, without warning, she turned her head sharply toward him. Daniel stumbled back, his flashlight flickering. The veil had lifted slightly, just enough to reveal a glimpse of what lay beneath. Her lips were sewn shut. A choked gasp escaped his throat. The stitches were dark and uneven, as if done hastily, painfully. The threads dug into her pale skin, pulling the corners of her mouth into an eternal, grotesque smile. Then she did something that made his blood turn to ice. She raised a hand and pointed directly at him. Daniel's body reacted before his mind could catch up. He staggered back, nearly tripping over the worn-out carpet beneath him. His instincts screamed at him to leave, to get out of the manor immediately. But something kept him rooted to the spot. The air had grown thick, suffocating. A strange pressure pressed against his chest, as if unseen hands were trying to hold him in place. Then, from above, a whisper, low, soft, right next to his ear. "Stay." Daniel spun around, but there was nothing there. His pulse pounded against his skull. His vision blurred at the edges. Every rational part of him knew he needed to leave. But when he turned back toward the staircase, the bride was gone. The only thing left was a trail of red petals leading to the bridal chamber. Chapter 5. The bridal chamber. Daniel's fingers tightened around his flashlight. His breath came in short, uneven bursts. The red petals formed a silent trail leading toward the end of the hallway. The bridal chamber. He hesitated. This was it. The room where Evelyn Carter had died. The room where her cries were still heard at midnight. A voice inside him screamed, "Don't go." But his feet had already begun moving. Each step felt heavier, as if the air itself was resisting him. The wooden floor creaked under his weight, the sound swallowed by the suffocating silence of the manor. As he reached the door, he noticed something strange. The handle was warm. That wasn't possible. The manor had been abandoned for years. There was no electricity, no heating. And yet, the handle felt as if someone had just touched it. Taking a deep breath, he turned it. The door swung open effortlessly. Inside, the air was thick with the scent of roses and decay. The room was perfectly preserved, as if frozen in time. A large canopy bed stood in the center, its red silk curtains drawn slightly apart. A dressing table sat against the wall, an antique mirror resting upon it, and at the far end of the room, a wedding gown hung from a wooden stand, untouched by dust. Daniel's flashlight flickered. There was something wrong with this place. It was too still, too undisturbed. It felt lived in. He swallowed hard and stepped inside. The moment his foot crossed the threshold, the door slammed shut behind him. Daniel spun around, his pulse hammering in his chest. He grabbed the doorknob, twisting it desperately. It wouldn't budge. His breath came fast and shallow. He forced himself to stay calm, to think. He had been in situations like this before. Locked doors, sudden noises, the tricks of an old house. But this was different. This wasn't just an abandoned room. Someone was here with him. A cold gust of air swept through the room, carrying the faint scent of roses. The silk curtains around the bed fluttered, though there was no wind. Then, from the dressing table, the mirror began to fog up. Daniel's stomach twisted, slowly, as if written by an unseen hand. Words appeared on the glass. "Do you remember me?" His blood ran cold. A sudden creak sounded from the canopy bed. The curtains shifted. Something was moving underneath. Chapter 6. Beneath the veil, Daniel's throat tightened as the curtains around the canopy bed rustled. Something was inside. His flashlight flickered, casting fleeting shadows on the walls. His hands trembled, but he forced himself to stay still, to listen. Then, a soft, shuddering breath from within the bed. Daniel felt his spine go rigid. The air around him had turned frigid, biting through his jacket. His instincts screamed at him to run, to get out before it was too late. But the door wouldn't open, and whatever was beneath the canopy was waiting. Slowly, with a hand that barely obeyed him, Daniel reached for the edge of the curtain. He hesitated. Deep silence filled the room, pressing against his skull. It felt like the very walls of the manor were watching. Then, before he could stop himself, he pulled the curtain aside. The bed was empty. Daniel blinked, his breath uneven. The sheets were pristine, undisturbed, as if no one had lain there for decades. The heavy pillows were still fluffed, untouched by dust. But then, he saw it. At the very center of the bed, resting on the silk sheets, was a crimson veil. His stomach turned. He recognized the fabric immediately. It was the same veil the ghostly bride had worn at the top of the staircase, and now it was here, as if someone had left it for him to find. His mind raced. He hadn't imagined it. The bride had been real, or at least something had taken her form. His fingers hovered over the veil. Some part of him knew he shouldn't touch it, but he had to know. He had to prove to himself that it was real, that this wasn't just his imagination playing tricks on him. Taking a deep breath, he reached out, and the moment his fingertips brushed the fabric, a scream tore through the room. It was inhuman, a sound of pure agony, of sorrow so raw, it felt like it could split the walls apart. Daniel staggered back, his vision blurring. The sound wasn't just coming from the room. It was coming from inside his head. The veil suddenly rose into the air, as if lifted by unseen hands. And beneath it, a face, a woman's face, pale and sunken, her lips still sewn shut with blackened thread, her eyes, empty sockets filled with darkness, locked onto him. Daniel couldn't move. He couldn't scream. Then, in a voice that was neither alive nor dead, she spoke. "You left me." The room exploded into darkness. Chapter 7. The Bride's Wrath. The darkness was absolute. Daniel's heartbeat thundered in his ears. His flashlight had died, leaving him blind in the suffocating void. The walls felt like they were closing in, the air thick with something heavy and unseen. And then, the whisper, "You left me." The voice was right behind him. Daniel spun around, but there was nothing, just the silence pressing in. He swallowed hard, his breath shaky. Then, from the canopy bed, the veil dropped to the floor. A chill ran up his spine. He didn't know what was more terrifying, the fact that the veil had moved on its own, or the fact that whoever had been holding it was no longer there. Suddenly the air shifted, a soft rustling of silk. Daniel felt it before he saw it, a presence, a movement in the dark. His instincts screamed at him to run, but his legs refused to move. Then, the mirror across the room lit up, not from any natural source, but from something else. And in the reflection, standing just behind him, was the bride. Her hollow eyes bore into his, her skeletal hands reaching out, The stitches on her lips were bleeding, unraveling slowly as she whispered again, "You left me at the altar." Daniel's body went cold. His mind reeled. This wasn't possible. He didn't know her. He had never been here before. He had never abandoned anyone. But before he could speak, she moved, her form blurred, flickering in and out like a dying light. Then, the hands in the mirror reached through the glass. Daniel stumbled back just as the fingers clawed the air where his throat had been. His shoulder hit the nightstand, knocking over a porcelain lamp that shattered on impact. A sharp sound, breaking the tension. For a second, the bride hesitated. Daniel saw his chance. Ignoring the throbbing in his shoulder, he lunged toward the door, twisting the knob with all his strength. This time, it opened. He staggered into the hallway, his pulse pounding. But just as he turned to slam the door shut behind him, a pair of ice-cold hands grabbed his wrists. The last thing he saw was her face, twisted with rage, her mouth finally free of stitches, screaming his name. And then, everything went black. Chapter 8. Buried Secrets. When Daniel woke up, his body felt paralyzed. The world around him was shrouded in fog. His thoughts fragmented. His breath came out in short gasps as he struggled to move, but something cold and heavy pressed against his chest. And then he heard it, scraping, a slow, deliberate dragging sound. His fingers twitched. He could feel the grain of old, rotting wood beneath him. The scent of damp earth filled his nostrils. Somewhere above, the distant echo of rain tapping against glass reminded him that he was still in the hotel. But something was wrong. Daniel forced his eyes open. He was no longer in the hallway. He was in a small, suffocating space, a wooden box. His coffin. Panic shot through him like electricity. His heart pounded against his ribs. He kicked out, his feet slamming against the wooden panels. His hands clawed at the sides, splinters embedding into his skin. No, no, no. He wasn't dead. He wasn't supposed to be here. Then, a voice, soft, humming. It was a song, a wedding tune. Daniel's breath hitched as the voice grew closer, the humming turning into a whispering chant. "You left me. Now, you will stay with me." His body went ice cold. No, this wasn't happening. Suddenly, the lid cracked open. A pair of dead, rotting eyes peered in. The bride was above him, her decaying lips curved into a twisted grin. Daniel screamed. Then the coffin collapsed into darkness, and Daniel fell somewhere miles away. An old newspaper fluttered in the wind, landing on the doorstep of the Ravenwood Inn. The headline read, "Mysterious Disappearance of Journalist Investigating Haunted Hotel." Below it, a grainy black and white photo of Daniel stared back. His eyes were full of life, but deep within the walls of the cursed hotel, a new portrait hung in the grand hallway. A wedding portrait, and standing beside the ghostly bride was Daniel, smiling forever. Epilogue: The Eternal Bride. Years passed, but the legend of the Ravenwood Inn never faded. Guests whispered about the crying sounds at midnight, the scent of withered roses lingering in the hallways, and the shadowy figure of a man standing beside the bride in the old wedding portrait. Some claimed to have seen his reflection in the mirrors, staring back with hollow eyes, silently pleading for help. But no one could save him, because once you are chosen by the bride, you belong to her forever. And so, the Ravenwood Inn remained, cursed and waiting for its next visitor. Would it be you?